All right, brothers, man. How's everybody doing this morning?
Living.
Good.
That's good. I wanted to thank you guys again for allowing us to take some time to sit down and have this discussion. Obviously, we're continuing to try to make sure that we're offering our perspective as Black men onto everything that's going on in the world. And so, it's good to have you brothers here available. We have myself, Dewan Bennett, who will be doing some moderating today. We have Jeff Galloway, Warren Wilson, Jacoby Bradley, and Paris Geary. All will be contributing to perspective today. Let's jump right in, brothers, man. We are still here in the middle of a pandemic. The way that some states are moving, particularly here with Texas, and other places around the world, Florida, they acting like it's over. So, is the pandemic over? How do you guys feel about the pandemic, where we are, and what's going on?
We in trouble, man. I think the leadership in this country right now is giving out the wrong information, and people are just running with it. Like, I feel like out here in Texas, they see Trump not wearing no mask. They're like, I ain't wearing no mask. So I'm gonna just do whatever I want to do. Plus, Abbott out here, he just opening up stuff. It's crazy, man. We're in a dangerous spot.
Yeah, I think we're in a very, very scary moment because things opened up, people got sick, and instead of like looking at maybe taking our time, we continue to do things. So I think that this reoccurrence is going to just continue. I don't think it's going to stop no time soon. I think the flu season coming up too is going to add more to what's going on. So I think we need to be cautious. I see a lot of jobs still going to be closing, and I just feel that we're in a very tight situation. Like, it's not looking good. It's not looking good at all.
I don't think people really care, honestly. I mean, at this point, you got people that if they've been really affected by it, then they care to the extent where they're like, I've had family members suffer some great health complications. But outside of that, I don't think people really care. People go outside. It's not just Florida and Texas. It's in California, too. So I don't think people care much.
I think the current pandemic is something that's real. It's something that we need to take in consideration and have a little bit more respect for than what we do. But the inconsistency of how it's been implemented from state to state has kind of put us in a situation where now it's almost to a uncontrollable point, to where now you got to figure out how do we adapt to it and live with it, because it's not going away the way people thought it would. It's getting hotter outside. That's not changing anything with it. So now we have to figure out how do we adapt and live with it, because we're at a point to where we're going to be forced to be in that environment more consistently, whether we like it or not. We're not going to be able to stay inside all the time. So how do we live with it? Now we're at that point. It's kind of how I'm looking at it. How do we adapt with it?
And I want to echo what Jeff brought up. There's so much unknown, and nobody's really releasing enough information for people to really make educated decisions on what to do next. So one minute you're wearing your mask, but people don't know which type of mask, and then another time it's like, oh no, the states can open, so you'll be just fine, but then the numbers go up. So with so many inconsistent messages, I think people are just, as Mr. Bradley was saying, is making their own decisions, and it's just leading to more chaos or more uncontrollable situations. So I think people need to start to educate themselves because you're not getting the right information coming from the leadership.
I agree. I think that one of the biggest problems is leadership. I think that if you look at how our previous administration handled the Ebola situation, where immediately they identified the 2 people who had Ebola, who had made it to the United States. They locked them down, surrounded them with doctors, quarantined them, made sure everybody else was tested and okay, and made it a real national health crisis, that they were able to isolate it and keep it from spreading. I think, unfortunately, in these situations when a pandemic happens, that's where true leadership shows. I think too often in this country, we tend to make people leaders simply because either they have money or they have popularity, right? Those things aren't necessarily the characteristics that are needed for a true leader. We have people who need to be willing to put themselves out there, make changes, and lead or rally or galvanize people together that's going to support them. And I think when you have leadership who always want to make sure that they stay on the political side of an agenda, I think that's where the problem is, because we always know that sometimes politics aren't always for the people. And that's why we have a situation with COVID where you have some states are completely locked down, some states are open. It's almost like we needed to either be everything open or everything closed. And I think if you have that everything open or everything closed, obviously everything open is probably not the best option. But if you have whatever decision you make and leadership is standing by it and they're going to be consistent in why and giving people data and information to support the decision that they make, I think you would have less people being defiant or less people just saying, man, I don't care. What are some things that you guys have been doing to manage yourselves through this? I think one of the issues that I've run into or we've seen in the mental health community is a lot of the social anxiety, people starting to struggle again with social anxiety. If you have depression, if you have any type of substance abuse disorder, or any of those symptoms, depression, sadness, are going to be exacerbated during this time. So what do you guys have done to kind of make sure you keep balance as well as keep your family balanced during this time?
So, man, I got a lot of different ways that I've been actually dealing with this pandemic. What's crazy is, so I'm gonna start from work. Work has actually got more almost intense and a little bit more. I'm starting to see it even in my staff anxiety because now that we're doing everything online and going from a face-to-face type of environment to completely online and not really being prepared for it, I start getting emails at like various hours of the day because people are like, I can just send you a message and I'm hoping that you're going to respond at any time. So I even have staff who are at 1 o'clock in the morning doing work, and I'm like, hey, you have an 8-hour shift in there. Yeah, but my emails get so backed up. So I'm speaking to what you're talking about, that anxiety from work, because now they feel like I'm being evaluated on how I engage online. And it's kind of, I'm starting to see them get worried about, oh, I'm not getting my messages out fast enough, or I'm not responding fast enough. So their anxiety is picking up. They're feeling overwhelmed, and I have to go, look, at 8, you work 8 hours. After that 8 hours, call it a day. You don't have to respond to everything. So yeah, that anxiety and overwhelm feeling is really happening in the work environment. To be honest, I'm also just I go to the gym still. My gym does very well at keeping, it's a flawless boxing. So a little plug there. So at my gym, he has it labeled out to where you get your own space. And so that allows you to really get a good workout in. And of course, you wipe everything down when the day's over. So that's one thing. And then actually at the end of the day, I still get outside with my son. We either go for a run or we'll just spend some time walking around. So I still try to create as much balance as possible because I don't want to find myself just really stuck in the house. And I don't think that's good for us in general. So that's how I deal with it.
It's a little bit different for me. I mean, I'm in a state where things have slowly opened up, but I was also in a state where, in Kentucky, we were a lot stricter at the beginning of this. We had a lot of access denied. We were on top of it, and it's allowed us to have a little bit more freedom moving forward. So during that time, I mean, turn the garage into a gym in order to kind of stay in shape, keep my boys active, wife active, everything in that manner. We take walks, trying to get out at the same time, though. Great family time. I think for me, the biggest thing was investing into the family, really focusing on that time that we hadn't had in the past due to work. So, we got to talk about different shows or movies or educate each other on certain things that we wasn't aware of. We have the talks about the pandemic. We talk politics. We talk about a vast amount of things that will help us be a lot more informed in this working environment that we're dealing with right now. So anxiety's high. I go back with the work part. I agree with the work part. Emails are through the roof, and people have more access to you than what they normally would. So they're invading hours and time frames that they normally would, respect in the past. Now it's kind of like, hey, I need a response. I need a response. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges as of right now is how do you separate work from family time, and when's the cutoff when you literally leave work, even though you got a lot of online access and people having accessibility to you at random time frames. So I agree with that part with the work. But that's what we've been doing on this end.
Yeah, that's key that you said that, Warren. You're talking about that work-life balance, and work-life balance has really been challenged with people with children. Like some of my clients with kids, like kids are in the Zoom video, kids are on the telehealth call, like kids are all in the way because they're trying to study. They need their mom and their dad. Work is calling at crazy hours. The pandemic has really shaken us up in a way that we've never seen before. I don't think, especially our age group, being in our mid-30s, heading on 40s. But I think what I've been doing mostly is, like we talked about before, is locking in a lot of time with the wife, doing a lot more studying, just different stuff, whether it be in regards to my continuing education or if it's something just about history, just whatever it is, just gaining some more knowledge and kind of following. We got a Senate race coming up here in Texas, so reading up on the politics about who's running, doing things like that for the upcoming election on the 14th. So just different stuff like that. Just having more time to actually dive deeper into some subjects where you just kind of browse over them when you're working your regular time. So that's kind of as well as working out, just like all you guys said.
I mean, due to my career, I mean, I'm still kind of in the field every day. So I would be one of the people that have been less affected as far as like their daily life. I mean, my job really don't stop. The one thing I'll say that's a significant change in it, though, is that obviously I lower my exposure to people. I'm not as quickly to contact people as I would be due to the fact that, I mean, since we don't really know what's going on with the whole COVID-19 disease, I'm not going to put myself into situations where I expose myself to higher probability of exposures if I don't have to. So I'm gonna limit how much time I'm going to actually interact with people and do things. So I'll say that the environment, as far as just getting to know people or talking to people or even having to just interact with them on a criminal basis, I'm definitely doing a lot less of that. And then outside of that, I mean, in my free time, family is having more discussions about things that are going on in the world like everybody else is. Also just paying a lot more attention to people that have these high social media platforms, you know, the Candace Owens of the world and Killer Mike, and different people like that. Just listening to a lot of variety of different opinions and seeing how they affect politics and also just the younger generation. I think it's a lot of different information that comes in between those groups. Not a particularly a fan of everybody within that platform, but I definitely like to hear what their opinions are because obviously somebody's listening to them. So that's what I'm noticing a lot of, really. And then if I get a chance to, just paying more attention to music. Like, obviously, we all like music. You get more of a chance to really listen to the content that's coming out. I think for the artists that are putting out music, they are putting out some amazing projects. And I think we have more time to listen to really their artistry and what they got going on.
Tap, are they like mandating y'all have less contact with the public, or is that kind of just you yourself? Like, I ain't dealing with nobody.
So you already know me. The first thing that I asked as soon as we realized that this was going on is the first question I asked, and what we have is briefing. It's a meeting every day that you have before you go out there and you do your job in the streets. As soon as I realized it started getting serious, obviously I'm gonna ask, am I mandated to talk to people? The answer in our department and in most departments is going to be that you're not mandated to talk to people. You're not. So, but my whole thing is this, is that even if I was just supposed to contact them just to say, hello, hi, how you doing? I'm asking, is anybody going to be looking to see if I'm doing those things on my shift or if I'm just sitting there not doing nothing? There are times where I'm not going to do nothing at all. That's just how it goes because they're not mandating me to talk to people, which they wouldn't have in the first place. But sometimes it's encouraged to get out there and know the public. Right now, I don't want to get to know the public. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but if I can't talk to you through Zoom or FaceTime, which we really don't have them capabilities in my job, I don't want to know you right now. It's just one of those things where it's better for you and it's better for me. So they're not mandating us to do it, and I'm taking my time to get to know people.
You know, I think that there's going to be a lot of changes when whatever happens from this time period, you know, going into next year and even when COVID is done. I think this impact is going to change is how everybody does business because now you don't have to really engage the same way, you know. So that's another thing that I've been thinking of in regards to my industry is how is this going to change the impact of actually being in an office on a regular basis or engaging with, you know, various staff, faculty, and other administrators. It completely changed the game. I think that the individuals in this group that do mental health, I think this is going to change exactly how you can engage with more clients. And I like to hear that. So what's the plan so far with you over there?
So to be honest with you, you know, for my field, there has been a surge in obviously the need for mental health. So, you guys know I'm pretty regularly busy, and so I've had to unfortunately either turn people away or redirect them to other therapists, which is, I guess, is a good thing because what you're seeing is a need for mental health services now, and I think this is an opportunity for companies and organizations to look at bringing hiring mental health professionals within their organizations to be able to service their staff. We've talked plenty of times about companies that have EAPs, but you know it's good. I watch a show, Billions, on Showtime, and despite all the craziness that's going on with the show, he has a psychologist or psychiatrist who's embedded in house on the staff, and so it makes a big difference. So as that the staff is dealing with anxiety or even issues within their family, they can just walk into the office. You guys know I do work with the fire departments and the police departments here, and you know there's times when I'm inside the firehouse, and if there's something going on or someone needs something, they can just approach me and we can sit down, find an area to talk. Having mental health people on staff in your organization is going to be very important. I think for me personally, it has allowed me to kind of settle down a little bit. I've gotten away from the traditional in the office face to face to where a lot of it is Zoom. So I've been able to spend a little more time at home. So instead of me waking up, you know, getting dressed, putting on a shirt and tie, and then making a 30-minute commute into the office, I've been able to, you know, spend that time at home, put on a t-shirt and jump on a Zoom. And I think it's given me more access to people. So I went from just kind of having majority of my clientele within the city of or within the DFW population to now I'm seeing people all over the state, you know, whether it's the Houston area, Austin area, El Paso, because now people are starting to get used to the virtual aspects of therapy in ways, the other aspects in which they can communicate with people. So just trying to do that. And you guys know me, man, as far as I try to do as much as I can, whether, you know, now me and my family, we get out and ride bikes and, you know, me and my wife, we work out together sometimes. Me and my son, we both got our boxing gloves and we're able to, you know, spend more time kind of, you know, working out our martial arts skills and things of that nature. So I think that balance and everything that's going on has allowed me to settle down. But I also acknowledge that there's a lot of people out there who are suffering because not only do we have a pandemic and, you know, with them worried about their health, we have a lot of people who are fearful of losing their jobs and a lot of people who have also already lost their jobs. And so trying to make sure in whatever way, you know, we could be there for those people who may need services but can't afford services. So I've always made myself available for people. If you call me and you get me on the phone and you tell me your story, a lot of times, even if you can't afford my services, I'm going to be able to offer those services for you. Just because, again, you know, when people need help, you want to be able to find ways to help people. And I think myself and Jeff as well has made sure, even if we wasn't being compensated, we made sure we help people because right now, as a community, not only as a community, as a country, we need to learn to pull together and figure out how we can do little things that's going to make a big impact on everyone else. And I'm happy that everybody is managing and maintaining, but are we going to get our sports back? That's the real question.
But I got one more.
Go ahead.
And before we switch over to that one, I still don't understand why in this pandemic we haven't really discussed just overall like holistic ways of taking care of ourselves, because a lot of it is surrounded around what medications, and we didn't really get into that. I'm sorry we didn't, but that's the part that I think is missing is people talking about what holistically you can do to take care of yourself with vitamins, how you can just really preserve your body from getting this pandemic. So maybe another time we'll talk about that because I do want to get into this sports stuff. I want
to slide it in there real quick. You got your black seed oil, you got your turmeric, you got your moringa, you got all the stuff on Dr. Sabi's website.
Dr. Sabi's website, yeah, man.
All that stuff on there, bro. You're good to go.
You got. Right. I think the best thing. I think the best thing you said right there. You talking about, you know, we got to focus on our immune system, and as we get ready to switch this topic, you got to understand when pandemics occur, it's not something that we've experienced a lot of them within our lifetime, but we have to understand from a historical perspective, it's always been a time to capitalize on, say, the Black individual, you know, so you have to really be aware of what's going on with the pandemic, stay educated in it, and understand that, you know, this is in the best interest for you as a Black person. because we've been exploited when it comes to these pandemics or these particular crises, and it leads to us being lab rats or guinea pigs later on. So we got to really be smart about how we want to pursue this moving forward.
Right.
I agree. I think that there has to be a focus on what we're doing day to day. Obviously, as individuals, we have a right to be able to take care of ourselves. And although we have the government that we assume is going to give us information, we can't always wait for the politicians to get it together. They're going to act, for the most part, in their best interest. We have to go ahead.
My bad. I said, you see, Trump don't let Dr. Fauci talk no more. Dr. Fauci was the top part of the task force he put in place. Cuz don't even talk. You don't even see dude no more.
He ain't even on the photo.
He ain't even on there no more.
Because it becomes too political, and Dr. Fauci is, as a medical professional, he has rights and responsibilities to do no harm. So, he has to make sure that he is providing information that, for the most part, is not going to be harmful. And I think, whether it is managing our health and managing our mental health, whether it's going out and taking a walk, getting some sun, getting some vitamin D, making sure that you can, start a garden, things like that. A lot of times with COVID, you have people that say, well, it's COVID, I'm not leaving the house. Well, if you don't leave the house, there's going to be long-term effects associated with your mental health well after COVID is over. So there has to be activities that you can engage in while still practicing social distancing, while still being safe, that still allows you to get a sense of socialization as well as a social natural energy and healing associated with your body. And, one of the things that has me worried, and I know we're all excited about, our sports returning, but is okay, I want us to have sports. Sports is a distraction, it's an entertainment, it's fun, but those players also have families, right? They also have children, they also have wives. So how do you guys feel about us returning back to sports?
I think if it's the college kids, if I had a kid in college, he or she would not be playing. The pros, they grown, they can make that choice for themselves, they getting compensated, etc. College kids, I don't think it's I wouldn't send them, but that's a money thing. We might have Warren talk about that, but it's big business with college football, man. So I think they're gonna come back and put them kids out there, which is unfortunate.
You said the key word though. I mean, you said if you had an adult, or an adult can make that decision for themselves, but if you had a kid, you wouldn't be letting them play. I mean, first of all, we know that most of these kids are over 18, so the choice to play is kind of going to be on them. Second of all, it's just as much a business for them as it is for an adult. You got a kid right now who's coming from an impoverished situation or who has been betting or investing their whole life on their sports career. I mean, their necessity and their need to play is just as important as a LeBron James for them. It's the difference between changing everybody around them's life or, going back to life as it is normal. So, I mean, obviously the sad part about this for me is that the high school sports, college sports is just as much of a business as adult sports is. And these kids that are playing at high caliber programs are putting up a crazy stat line. I mean, depending on their situation, they need to play just as bad as everybody else does. So I don't know if I feel comfortable with sports coming back, but I damn sure understand the need for certain people to be playing.
But you got to think though, Tav, right? Everything that they do in the day-to-day, how many showers they got? They ain't got 80 showers at the football program. They ain't got all the new plastic utensils. They ain't gonna be social distancing, tackling each other, playing basketball. They're not gonna be doing all that. So you got to protect them kids. Even though he 18 or she 18, you still got to protect them because they think they're invincible. And then the information that they're putting out right now is that it's not affecting that age group, which is a lie.
I understand, and I know we got a whole bunch of people to talk, so I'm gonna get right into it. I'm gonna cut straight to the point. If you give me one of my young black brothers and sisters is coming from the hood, that come from an impoverished neighborhood, that is coming from the ghetto, that needs this opportunity to change their life, 80 showers or one shower, they might be out there. And I'm not saying that that's the right thing, but this is the world that we live in. I mean, they already come from circumstances that's just as dangerous, if not more dangerous than COVID. I mean, let's not necessarily single people out, but let's single them out. You give me somebody from Chirac right now. He needs to play. So damn COVID. I mean, I'm just saying he needs to play. It's a very, very important for him to have those opportunities so that he can get out of those situations, or that he can come back to Chicago and be in a position to monetarily make a change. So for me, I look at it as in, yeah, some people don't need to play, and maybe they come for the money and they're not important, but some people have life risking decisions that they have to wager and make in order to get on that field. And I think that happens every day.
So I see.
I think oh, my bad.
Go ahead.
Cut you off.
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
I think the bigger concern is do you get these students back in school first? Because right now this pandemic has made people, you should be thinking about, you got to be a student first and an athlete second. That's what you're there for. You're not going to get into these college institutions unless you got some type of student in front of you first to be able to qualify you to get in. So right now the focus has went back to, and it needs to be, you need to be a student. We talk about it in athletics all the time. We say, hey, you need to play this as if this could be your last rep. Well, a lot of people take that for granted, and here we are in this situation where for some of them, this will be their last rep. So now, what have they done academically this whole time trying to take advantage of this college opportunity? When you talk about sports, it's a trickle down effect. I mean, you talk about the pros and it's money driven, and that stuff runs the economy in America. And you talk about the Power Fives and colleges and some of those mid majors. I mean, that makes a lot of revenue for what's going on in order for us to be able to do what we're doing right now in ways that we may not even consider. When you start going into the lower divisions, the D2, the D3, and the NAIA, now you got to be realistic. Even if you a kid coming from Chirac or somewhere in Oakland or somewhere in Third Ward, if you had a D2, D3, NAIA, your exposures and those opportunities to really play professional were already limited to begin with. So for me, I look at it as being a person that's in that profession, that's dealt with that from a corporate standpoint, working in corporate, and then getting into the profession of coaching within the college levels. Kids got to focus back on being students. And we have to change that mindset for us as individuals, that we're sending them to college to better themselves, to get an education. We can't just keep sending them there to just go play sports and think that that's going to solve the problem. Sports don't last. The average person that plays in the NFL is going to be 3 years. So now what? What happens after 3 years if you do make it? If you don't have a degree, if you didn't take advantage of the opportunity of being a student and getting that free education or the education that you ended up paying for. Those are the things that, I think we got to refocus on as sports return, because they will return, but it will be a lot different than what we are accustomed to and seeing. So we got to think about that. What are we trying to send as a message to these kids that are in this situation? Yes, they need to get out of the streets for some of them. And yes, they need it for physical activity. But once again, we need to reemphasize that you need to be a student. Take advantage of that. Some of them think a student, they ain't gonna never go to college.
I think everybody is saying that we're student first. I 100% agree with that, right? But the reality is that a lot of people do bet and wager on their sports career. When you get there, the institution itself already caters their schedule around the athlete so that he can commit himself to sports. It's not really catered to him being a student first. And
that's only on the Power 5 levels. Like, that's only in D1. Like D2, D3, NAIA, it's not catered to that like that,
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I'm seeing this in so many aspects, and it's kind of funny that I'm in like the perfect storm to watch this happen. So on the professional level, man, I can't wait for it to come back, because it's just something to entertain me during the week. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to change how they're going to show us sports now. I think arenas are going to probably be smaller for a second before people can actually get in there. So that's going to be a little different watching that. And then, as Warren was speaking on, at the high power levels in college, it may be a little different, and they may promote sports in a different way. But I'm going to come from it working in education, and then my son actually playing in the high schools. And I'm echoing kind of what Warren just said. We had a lot of kids, because my son is associated with a lot of kids that play basketball. And this year, when California had their state finals, the kids that were from the Northern California area that had those at least mid-major opportunities or even any D1 opportunities, they got cut short because they couldn't really display their talents because, you know, the championship game got cut. So them students who were like, man, I had a Division II school or even like a mid-major looking at me, they had to now settle for, well, they stopped contacting me. I'm now at a JC. And so the importance of, you know, that education is there, but I'm saying even those small mid-majors or that opportunity of now I don't have to at least pay for my education was taken from those students. And that's where I went to. Like, I felt bad that there was not an opportunity anymore. Now they have to try to figure it out from the JC level into a 4-year, whereas at least before they could have got a mid-major and still followed their goal. So as much as I want the sports to come back, of course, I want my son and everybody that's associated to be safe. And I think that what's going to end up happening is it's just going to be a different way of sports being shown to us. Instead of, you know, going to the game, everybody's, unless you probably in the media or on the team or a coach or a staff member, we're all going to be watching it. And I think that it's going to probably affect, but at least we get our entertainment back. That's kind of the perspective or Braspective I've been seeing it from. Because we need sports. It's funny how our society works. We need that sports because we need that camaraderie. We need a reason for us to engage with one another. So going back to what you're saying, DeJuan, we need that. Hey, did you watch the game, just to get us to socially interact? So of course we need sports to come back, but I think it's just going to be so different, and it's going to affect people in different ways. So Warren, you had something you were saying?
I was going to say, though, real quick, you know, I think Warren brought up a good point when he talked about us being used as guinea pigs. So when we're talking about sports returning, we're talking about a couple major sports, right? We're talking about football, we're talking about basketball, and we're talking about baseball, right? That's what we're really talking about. You know, when we're talking about football and baseball, those sports are highly populated by African Americans. So are we sending our African American children to be guinea pigs to these schools? A lot of these schools, guys, these big programs, particularly when we're talking about like an SEC, right? We want to talk about big dog sports. They're in the South. They're in these small towns that are made up of the college students. So if you have 50, 60 football players who get sick, another, you know, 5, 6 basketball players, do we have the infrastructure to make sure that these students who we send out on the field to entertain us can now get properly taken care of? Do you guys trust that? Because when I'm looking at what's going on around the world with COVID, or particularly here in the States, and how, you know, Black people are you know, at higher rates of dying when being affected with COVID than anyone else. And again, we know the history with African Americans and you know, the medical treatment in general, where again, there's always been a belief that Black people have a higher pain tolerance, that Black people tend to complain a lot. So when we're in the doctor's office, we're going to be waiting in the ER a lot longer. Are those kids who need treatment because they're trying to entertain us, are they going to get the top quality treatment? Because we use their bodies to entertain us. Are we going to then take care of their bodies in the same way that we use their bodies? That's where I look at. If we're okay with not opening schools for students, why would we be okay with having sports? And as someone who ran track in college, and I know Warren is not only was he a D1 athlete in the SEC, he's also a coach and works at a university. PU works at a university. I've been an adjunct professor at a university. I look at the students and I say to myself, would I be okay with risking at least one of their lives for my entertainment? And unless we're talking gladiator sports, I'm not okay with that, right? There's a reason that we don't do gladiator sports anymore in that way. Because if we see one kid collapse and die on the court, or one kid collapse and die on the field because they didn't have to be there, and we find out they passed from COVID-19 just in the season, or do they say, hey, that number is a number we're willing to accept? And I always wonder, how are we going to manage those spaces? Warren, what do you think? What do you see, or how do you feel about all this? If you can look at it from an athlete side, from being a D1 athlete in the big dog sport, to also now being a coach.
I think it's more on a sports basis. I mean, let's use baseball for an example. For the most part, you play a baseball game, and the person that's going to touch the ball more than anybody is going to be the pitcher, the catcher, the first baseman, and probably the shortstop. the reality is, social distance wise, they're more than 6 feet apart from each other consistently, besides when somebody's on base running. So that sport limiting a lot more physical contact, just in my perspective. Basketball, you have less people within the playing field, but yet there's physical contact. I think that the game of basketball has changed so dramatically that what I look at when I see the NBA season probably starting back is I'm looking at even a more decrease in defense in the NBA. It's not like they play defense like they used to in the past. So now you're talking about a COVID situation where they probably going to be a little bit hesitant trying to touch each other more than they need to. I
All-star
look
game.
at the game to be, it's going to be more of an all-star approach. Who can score the most points from the opportunities they take? So I'm not saying that they're out the red zone in that part of, not being affected by COVID, but the reality is they can limit the contact a little bit more. When you talk about football is a sport that is built on contact. You're going to change sweat being on individuals. You're going to have situations where people may unintentionally spit on you or probably intentionally spit on you. You're going to have some type of exchange of body fluids from coughs to whatever, or you're tackling people with your gloves and you forget and you rub your nose, trying to brush something off, and you transfer whatever body fluid to a vulnerable part of your eyes, your nose, even your mouth, sometimes the water bottle. So there's a lot of gray area in football, and trying to figure out from the one's perspective, I think, is how do you regulate that? How do you prevent individuals from being at a higher increase of catching that? And I'm not sure there's an answer for that, honestly. Not with the way that sport is played. I don't know if you can prevent that from occurring. I do know that once you engage in it, then the risk is there. I do understand that from a money perspective, NFL organizations and, Power Five conferences and stuff like that, they got to do it. But also understand from a broader scale that most colleges run off the revenue or having football be the driving force of students coming to that campus. And when you take that away from them, you're going to have a trickle down effect of college universities or institutions not being able to sustain long term, and they're going to either have to merge or they're going to have to close. So now you come into a point to where, how do you try to compromise or come to a middle ground in how you want to be able to do the two of them to try to have the least amount of casualties? And I think that's where there's a lot of conflict. I mean, you can put football in the spring, but then you got us playing in the spring, and then you got us playing in the fall back to back. That's taxing on the athlete. So the real issue is, worst case scenario, could we live without football? And that's something that I don't have an answer to. I know that a lot of people don't want, and I also understand from a high school perspective, and guys that are seniors, this their last year in college, trying to get an opportunity or trying to get into college. We don't know. This could be a wash year, and it could be a year that the reality is everybody is probably not going to play college football in each division. That's what we're seeing right now. So
Go ahead.
So yeah, so I got some I got a controversial thing, and then I got something I just read that's gonna kind of bring us to life a little bit. So one, somebody said, and I believe it was you, Mr. Bennett, you said guinea pigs. So I personally feel that the bubble is going to be a guinea pig situation. I think we're going to see what comes from the bubble and how that happens. And I think that's going to then translate to how all other sports responds. Because once they figure out the bubble and how that works, who gets sick from the bubble, or how the championships or viewers start to engage with the bubble, then other sports are going to be like, okay, that's a blueprint we can kind of follow, and this is how we're going to do it. And what's sad about that is just what you just said. How many African Americans are playing basketball? So you can find a little bit of controversy in there right there. It's like, why'd you pick basketball just to do the bubble? So I'm just saying that right there. I think the bubble is going to tell us what's going to happen with at least professional sports. And then going to what Warren just said in regards to sports in general, I just read something in California, at least in some of the community colleges, they're looking at all sports being done in the spring. Like they're going to all sports, and they're going to set up schedule for all sports being in the spring possibly. So you'll have football, basketball, track, baseball, all happening in the spring. Good thing is you get your sports, people get to play. Bad thing is if you're a dual athlete, you got to pick one. You ain't gonna be able to play football and then turn around and play baseball or run track. You're gonna be in one sport. So that's something that I read about them doing, which is probably something that can take place. You know, if every sport runs at least in the spring, you see how it happens. And then for what's bad though, is like Warren just said, when fall comes back, do you go back to regular schedule? So those are two things I wanted to put out there real quick, because I can see a lot of injury happening if you have all sports at one time. Then at the same time, I think the bubble is going to determine where everything else goes. And sorry, basketball players, you guys are going to have to show us how COVID, as well as views, take place during the sports session.
I think resources matter, and when I look at the resources, when I see a professional athlete, you know, who had an opportunity to say, hey, you know, I'll forego my salary, I'm not going to play, but you know, they're on a contract, so you know, if you signed a 5-year contract and you decided to not play this year because of COVID, you would hope that you still have 4 years to make your money. But with them being millionaires and them being part of the NBA, in a certain way, I would trust the NBA to make sure that their athletes have the best healthcare that they can afford to buy, right? They can purchase. So you have the NBA, you have their money, and then you have the professional athlete as an individual. Now, everybody's not a LeBron James and all that, right? Majority of the athletes make, you know, they're millionaires, or they, you know, 100,000aires. So they're not all these multimillionaires, but they have the resources available. To me, the college kids don't. I mean, so what happens? A college kid gets diagnosed with COVID, and you said you're going to quarantine yourself for 14 days, right? You quarantine yourself for 14 days. After 14 days, the kid's not healthy. Do they just send them back home to their families, right? So now you're sending them back home and their families, and you say your family has to deal with this situation. As a university, we cause this, but your family has to deal with it. I understand the finances about it. I understand money moves the needle. I understand all that. But what you're telling me is college athletes are essential personnel. And if they're essential, they should be paid. And if you're telling me you need football players in order for the universities to stay open and continue, you're telling me Black Lives Matter.
Full circle.
You're telling me in order for us to have these institutions that employ thousands of people, that educate thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, we need Black people to go out there and play football so everyone else can reap the benefit. So you're telling me Black Lives Matter, right? So now we're from the bottom of the totem pole to the top of the totem pole, right? We're good.
I think they are telling you that, but I mean, you hit it right on the head. I mean, let's think about it. In the state of California alone, they were told that all state schools are not going back to school. But there's a caveat to that. The caveat is that if you're a student athlete, you are returning to school in the fall. So you can't have it both ways, right? Either, like you said, no one's supposed to be returning because it's too much of a risk, or you're having them return to school due to the fact that they are essential. And just like you said, if we look at that from an ethnicity standpoint on a pie chart, you're going to have about 80, 90% of your student athletes representing the Black population. So, of course, Black lives do matter. It looks like sports is an essential need of us and everybody out there watching it. So I don't think you couldn't have said it any better than that. If it was that serious, then you don't need to be going to school, period. But somehow, some way in the state of California, if you shoot that rock, we need your ass to school.
You shoot that rock or tote that rock, you come in here. You're essential. We need you. Right? We need you. It's funny how that works. Part of me wonders, and I think this is the debate, guys, that we've had for years. If Black Lives Matter, if we know that our legs, our arms, our chest, our face, our bodies are what's gaining capital for these universities that spread into the communities that the universities choose to put that money in, right? I watched a documentary a couple years ago, and it was about the University of Alabama, and it showed, University Alabama, and then it had right outside the university, it had some poor African American communities, right? And then it had the suburbs that was far away from a university where you had all these rich people with these big, nice houses and all that. So the talent pool of players who came from these poor communities didn't reap any of the financial benefits. The communities didn't reach the benefit from the university. So what I would say is, why don't we send our children to HBCUs? You know, if you're a parent and you have a top athlete, you know, let's think about it, right? You have a Zion Williams, or you have a Bronny James. They could have went to any school and they still were going to be drafted. Bronny can go to any school, right? Look what happened. He went to a Catholic school in California. ESPN came, brought the cameras, right? Zion could have went to Albany State, Hampton, Texas Southern. He could have went anywhere. The cameras would have followed, and he still would have been drafted. And also, not to mention, last year we had 4 HBCUs make it to the tournament, right? So HBCUs can play the same talent. They can get in a lot of those invitational tournaments before the season, and then after the season, if you're good enough, you can make it. So why aren't we sending our kids to HBCUs?
I just want to offer a quick opinion on that one. I think that, and I mean, I don't like telling people how to spend their dollars, but let's just go there. I think that we need more buy-in from our entertainers, our Black, people that are in the financial field, these Black banks, everybody, right? Like, we have to kind of fund each other and stuff like that. The part of that for me is that if I had a kid and I was coming from an impoverished situation or something like that, the way that these schools appear, right? Your Dukes and your Bamas and stuff like that, they appear like you're going to the Gucci store or the Nike store. And flat out, when you look at the appeal of the HBCU, if we're not really talking about the Howards and Morehouses, things start to get a little fuzzy, right? So when I think about things like that, I feel like they don't have the same appeal from the eye standpoint. We all know that we have millions, I mean, not millions, but we have thousands and hundreds of HBCUs that are really good institutions that are beneficial to our kids. But we need all of us, and we need more buy-in into those things, because they're not getting that P. Diddy and people like that money that will allow them to have that platform, right? Not only would the cameras follow for certain people, but when you talk about Black moguls trying to buy teams and things like that and trying to get different products and stuff like out there, let's get a little bit more buy-in in those areas so they can just become more aesthetically pleasing to everybody. Like, I feel like that's one of the key things. We have to find a way to market that market, or market and advertise in that market, to make it a lot more appealing. That's what I think.
So
real quick, let me throw some quick stats out there to kind of even help support this argument. So we had, in 2018, we had 1.3, which is about 13% of the enrollment in college and universities, African Americans. These are African Americans who enrolled in what we call predominantly white institutions, or PWIs. Of that same number, in the same year, we had 228,000 students enroll in HBCUs. Now that number is down, because in 2000, I believe it was like 2010, there was 327,000, right? So that number is down. So we're starting to see less kids go to HBCUs. Now, part of the problem, I believe, is there's too many. There's 101 HBCUs, right? Over covering like 29 states or something like that, or maybe even less than that, right? So I think there's a lot of HBCUs, but we have kids that are going to college, right? There is a large percentage of African American kids that are going to college. It needs to continue, and a lot of our African American women are driving the force in that, But we're not going to our own schools. We're not good enough for our own schools.
So I got two that we started on that I want to get to. One, I went to an HBCU. I went to Howard as well as Oakwood College. So shout out to both of those HBCUs. But before I go, the educational piece is one aspect, but we started off talking about the athletic piece. And I wanted to ask Warren, when scholarships are offered from various institutions, your PWI probably has more money to offer in regards to a scholarship than an HBCU. And I wanted you to clarify that for me, because that's something that I don't, look into. But the question about sending athletes to HBCUs on scholarships, is that feasible? Like, do HBCUs generate, and I think that's the other question, generate enough money to say, hey, we can offer multiple scholarships to athletic, African-American students on a regular basis. You know, like a Duke can have 12 scholarships to give out in a year, and that's why they get the players that they get. Whereas the HBCU may be like, oh, we can only really get 2, and everybody else that comes got to still pay their own tuition. So Warren, clean that up for me before I actually then add my other pieces.
No, I mean there's a financial disadvantage for HBCUs. I mean
Right.
they inherited that financial disadvantage, and you know it's kind of the Juan's point. You know, Alabama is surrounded by all these non-wealthy communities, and they don't get any of the benefits from all the student athletes that go to Alabama. So nothing's being put back into it, and then it turns into what Taff said. You know, you have individuals of social status that have the money that could invest in the HBCUs, and some of them continually invest into the same couple HBCUs. They don't distribute the wealth enough. There are things to where, from the scholarship perspective, I think it now becomes what we program our black student athletes to want to pursue. And if you want to go for what looks great, then that's, you know, HBCUs don't all look great, but there are a lot of HBCUs out there that do have the eye appeal. Um, a lot of our black student athletes, or just students in general that are black, are not going to HBCUs because some of their parents have that stigma versus HBCUs, and they attended HBCUs. The financial revenue part is at a disadvantage. So yes, the scholarships are a lot more limited at HBCUs than they are at these powerhouse institutions. But the reality is the money is allocated to give scholarships. You have people that have those opportunities that are top tier athletes that deny those scholarship opportunities because they look at the window dressing of what they feel, you know, is more attractive or appealing to them, and they turn down those institutions. But yet, when they get to these traditional white institutions or PWIs or public white institution PWIs, they struggle academically. You know, they don't always exceed in the classroom because, yeah, they're great at sports, but they don't have a professor that looks like them, nor one that cares about their true academic success as a student actually graduating. They're there to generate the revenue, put the ball through the hoop, score touchdowns, and then, you know, after that, you know, hey, some of them, it's like disposable income. Who cares? You know, like whatever. Let's go with it from there. But if those students were to choose HBCUs, they might not have the best facilities at all of them, but they would have individuals that care about them enough to make sure that they succeed, they get a degree, they make those decisions. And I put a lot of onus on us as Black people having to change that narrative. You know, I think it's great that we send HBCUs. Would I send my kids there? Yes, if that was the best situation for them. And what I mean by that is if they had the degree field that my sons wanted to study, I thought it was the environment that I thought was going to be able to help them be able to be successful long term, and it was the best fit. Yes, and then I do understand that for some Black students in general and student athletes, you have to understand if they don't have the degree at that HBCU that they want to basically pursue, then why are they sacrificing their education just to go play sports? They got to go to an institution that has that degree field for them. So I think it's how you look at where you want to send your particular child in the future, but also think from a mindset perspective that HBCUs get a bad narrative from a PR standpoint because it's quick to be advertised all the negatives that happen at HBCUs. These these white institutions, traditional white institutions, they have a lot of same things that happen that occurred to HBCU, but it's not advertised. But they got the resources to clean it up to keep it out of the media, or you don't hear about it until it's too late, and they've already installed some type of plan to cover it up and make the adjustment. You know, so we have to, you know, do a better job, I think, and you know, take our students on HBCU tours to see what HBCUs are really about. Stop taking them to these big institutions or other PWIs, and you passing up HBCUs on the way, and you not educating them to let them get an opportunity to see that firsthand. I think that's where we got to do better at as people, because We've been talking about Black Lives Matter, and we talk about investing into Black businesses, and the biggest Black business that we have right now are those HBCUs, and we got to take care of them before we lose them. And when I say lose them, it stops looking like us, and it's gravitated to a point to where other people besides us are running it. And then we're gonna be talking about, what happened? Well, we got to support them. We got to change that narrative over time. I know it's not easy, but we got to understand that white institutions have the same problems that Black institutions have. One's just getting advertised more.
I just feel
Give them a shot.
I feel too, Warren, that it's kind of like when you're out there working in life and things like that, right? We all go out there, work hard, get jobs so that we can afford the finer things in life. Well, what are the finer things in life, right? That's really defined by what you've seen growing up to be considered those finer things in life. So in my opinion, when you're a young child and you're watching ABC and Fox and you're seeing certain schools with these TV deals and things like that, you're already being preconditioned to think that if I'm a baller, in order for me to define that I'm a baller, I got to go to Duke. It's the same thing as if I'm a baller in my financial life, being a doctor or a lawyer, I'm going to buy a house that signifies that. I'm going to buy a car that signifies that. We need to make sure that they're not only getting the funding, but they're getting the TV deals so that kids can start growing up thinking and seeing those things. What happens even when they're running their games and stuff like that? In between commercials that are coming on, you're seeing advertisement for the schools, the students walking around and how many people they've graduated. We need to put ourselves in that same situation to do that. It's not so much that they're not just appealing or they got the degrees and things like that. Hell, it's kids that's going to go to those schools due to the fact that even if they don't have their degree program or their field they want to study on, just due to the fact that that's what's been aesthetically pleasing. We need to put ourselves in a position where the marketing and the TV behind that also signifies that, because sometimes it's not about those other things. It's just about what appeals to the eye. You're going to buy a Nike before you're going to buy a Payless if you can afford it, because that's what's put in front of you to be the standard.
So
and before I cut you off, that player's likeness and image thing, I think that's beneficial for Black athletes. I think it's beneficial for all athletes, but I think it's beneficial for Black athletes because now you get to kind of dictate that, and you can go to whatever HBC you want to, and guess what? They're going to follow you. And
Yeah.
they're going to pay you. They're going to pay you. So you got a chance to change some things right now.
So I was going to say first, steel sharpens steel. Like everybody knows that. And I'm going to go to what DeJuan was just saying. At Howard, it was a benefit in seeing other African-American students just pushing just as strong as you are, as well as African-American professors teaching you those topics. Like there's no benefit to that. And to make the sports correlation, Shannon Sharp, he speaks on his HBCU experiences all the time. And I think that's a great platform that he has to do so, because he continues to say there is nothing better than going to the HBCU, the bands and the engagement in general. So for students who don't really get to see that exposure, and I think it's because a lot of people who play those sports at those institutions don't have the platform to speak on it. So I really admire Shannon Sharp for doing that on a regular basis. And then when Mr. Bradley was talking about, exposure on TV, DeJuan, I know you've been to a Grambling game during a Bayou Classic. And so the TV exposure on Bayou Classics is ridiculous. It's just I don't think enough people actually tune in to watch. And so all those different aspects, I think, contribute to how HBCUs can be better, because, again, it comes down to those platforms. And the last thing, Warren, I wanted to speak on, because I know our time is running short, was school, the educational system being the best investment. And it's sad because a lot of HBCUs do lose funding because, people stop attending, or, their financial status falls short. So your Morris Browns, fall short, then they have to get bought out by like another college and then come back. So these are things I think we all need to look into. A HBCU experience is great. I got to make sure I put the plug in for Howard as well as Oakwood College. I don't know if Mr. Bennett's going to bring in his, but man, those HBCUs experiences, you're not going to get them anywhere because the educational system is just different. I'm really still sharp and steel. I'll stop there.
I think part of our sense of self-awareness is magnified when we go to an HBCU. I think when you walk on an HBCU campus, it's celebrating Black culture. is celebrating Black excellence. Everything about it is a celebration of Black people. Rather, you're celebrating the first Black person to get their PhD from that university, the first Black woman president, the first Black, it's celebrated. So as a Black person, like you said, iron sharpens iron, steel sharpens steels, you find yourself with people who look like you, who may even come from the same communities as you, who may were able even raised in the same households as you, who are successful, and it makes you see that you can do it as well. And I think that is the part of it, that observational learning, that that intrinsic motivation that you get when you walk on a Black campus and everybody's greeting you. How's it going, brother? How's it going, sister? How can I help you? We're so used to walking in spaces where it's just one of us and we're ignored. Or if we're not ignored, everybody's walking, watching us, but no one's saying anything. That Black college experience is great. For me, what I've been consciously doing over the last couple of years is, and COVID kind of put a stop to that, but when we travel as a family, I find the local HBCU and I take my son and we just walk around. So he knows about HBCUs. So this is not something that is a fantasy. He's actually visited. And about time it's time for him to go to college, hopefully he's visited at least half of the HBCUs, you know? So trying to make sure that we are creating those spaces to where our people, our family can recognize the historic value of knowing who we are and where we come from, and how that historic value is praised in HBCUs is important. There's a lot of politics that go along with attending the HBCU, and a lot of people don't recognize. You know, I went to Langston. I love it, guys. When I tell you I love it, you know, coming from California, when I first got there, it was crazy, right? It was a cultural shock. I went from the Bay Area, big city life, to this small rural town with nothing around, no grocery store, no nothing. But the people there always embraced me. You guys know I experienced a very tragic event in college that took me away from campus for a couple of months. You know, in that, my first year there, these teachers didn't know me, the president didn't know me, yet I received letters of support from them. I was able to have my classes on hold and frozen while I dealt with my personal family issues. I was just not another student. They embraced me and they made me feel like a family member. So when you attend a university where it's people made up like you, they tend to understand that there's different variables that are going on that are associated with your productiveness and your production academically. They understand you may have family members who are at home or starving. So for me, you know, I've always looked at it as, why don't we send our children, our talented TIF, W-E-D-P-B Du Bois said, we take our talented TIF and we make sure we send them out to school so then they can come back. Why don't we take our talent and we say, hey, if you guys all go to HBCUs, then the resources will eventually follow. Because again, you know, earlier in football and basketball, your Michael Strahans, your Shannon Sharps, your Jerry Rices, your Terrell Owens, they all went to HBCUs because those were the only schools looking for them. But once they found out that they can start making money, because we tend to be the best at some of these things, then they said, you know what, now we want y'all to come. And again, we make money for them to take care of their kids, to take care of their families, and they don't put any of that money back into our communities. Again, not every HBCU is not going to work for every kid and every student. But for the ones that it does work, I always ask the kids, hey, what do you want to major in? And they're like, oh, I want to major in English, or I want to be a teacher. Well, you can go anywhere and get a degree in teaching. Why not go to an HBCU? You can go, instead of you going to University of Texas, you know, and spending $40,000, $50,000 in student loans, you can go to University of Texas Southern, get the same degree, be qualified for the same jobs and be competitive for the same jobs, and spend at least half that, and get a sense of pride and value about who you are. So that's kind of how I've always looked at the experience. I'm proud, as somebody who's attended PWIs as well as HBCUs, I'm proud of my HBCU experience. We didn't even mention the Greek experience at an HBCU. We're all Greek.
Right.
You know, we're all Kappas, right? So, you know, recognizing that Greek experience is even different because
totally different.
American Greek organizations, they're the football players, they're the basketball players, they're the people who are celebrated throughout the university, rightfully so, because they end up being the doctors, the lawyers, and all that. Not saying that other students aren't, but getting our children connected with our community is going to be important. And I think if there's anything that we need to learn during this process with COVID, and with all the civil unrest is that we need to stay as connected as we can to who we are, like you see in other communities, whether it's the Asian community, the Hispanic community, the Jewish community, staying connected to their roots and who they are and working together and investing in things that support them has to be important.
I mean, we didn't even
I
get.
got two things.
Yeah, go
I,
ahead.
w-
Go
I
ahead.
want to say, hey, shout out to Kentucky State University, man. I want to talk about the HBCU I went to, man. Shout out to them because regardless of what you go through at a HBCU, you're gonna be more prepared for life because they always gonna encourage you to make sure you finish. They gonna challenge you and they gonna put pressure on you, but you're gonna leave being a better individual than what you came in. So shout out to Kentucky State University, and then what the one was saying. I want everybody to put this in perspective. When you look at those PWIs and you're trying to figure out what's the difference between why our students that are black going to PWIs versus HBCUs. I've always said this: if you take the black student athlete out of PWIs, you'll notice that diversity has not really changed at those particular institutions. The only thing that has changed is that they have allowed integration to occur to a point to where they have capitalized off of the black student athlete, which has in return taken away from the HBCU's opportunity to be able to capitalize on that financial growth. So that is the difference between those two institutions when it comes to the student population. It is the black student athlete. So you gotta think about that, and that's going to be on us to kind of push those narratives within those student athletes and students in general to go back to HBCUs for the right reason.
Yeah, there's so many aspects we didn't touch on a PWI.
Right.
I did attend a couple of PWIs in order to get to the degrees I have, but my HBCU experience prepared me for those PWIs, to be honest. And so and then that Greek life perspective, and then there's just so many things that we didn't get to touch on that takes place in the HBCU that you will not find at any other institution. Maybe that's another topic. We should do HBCUs by themselves,
Right.
because in general, there's just so many aspects we can take from it. And then the Greek life, as you mentioned, in a HBCU to a PWI, being that I've been to both, I've seen it and I engage with both. And they're two different worlds. Like, I think the reason why some people join the Greek life in PWIs is because they're looking for that self connection, with somebody that looks like you. So of course you're going to join a Greek organization that's, at your PWI, that's based in, HBCU roots. So it's crazy how that takes place. And the last thing I was going to say is at a HBCU, it's Black History all year round. It's not just 1 month. So I wanted to make that plug as well, because you're going to learn your history in regards to being African-American in this country in the HBCU. And I think that's another growth within itself that takes place, because you start to see the value in, I'm proud to be Black, and not only am I proud to be an educated Black individual at a HBCU, this is why I promote that. So there's just so many aspects we can take that conversation itself in.
As we wrap up this discussion, I wanted to kind of, I have a story, man, that kind of shows you how you're received when you're at a PWI, and how your teachers, they kind of treat you like they're children in a way. I had just crossed Kappa, right? We at Langston, we got this little area that we call the tree. So I'm out there, I'm surrounding myself with the tree. I'm talking to my brothers, we talking to the ladies, we having a good old time. I got my jacket on, having a good old time. Well, my professor walked by, and she's going to class, Dr. Montgomery. Love her with all my heart. She says, Mr. Bennett, class starts in 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, Dr. Montgomery, I'll be there, all that. So, time passed, we're talking, and I guys, kid you not, she opened up the class window and yelled, Mr. Bennett, class is starting. You better run now for I'll mark you absent. Those girls are going to be there when you're done. And it was like, how often does somebody care that much about you that they're willing to go out their way to call you out? Now, most people would have taken that as and being embarrassed. I took it as, wow, she values me. The same teacher would tell me in class, Dewan, don't sit by her. She's going to distract you. Come sit up here. would make me sit in the front of the classroom because she knew I had a problem with sitting in the back talking to the ladies. Obviously, you would think that in college, someone shouldn't need that. But there are students, particularly students like me, who needed that tough love, who needed that teacher that's going to take the extra mile. Prior to going to Lexington, I attended the PWI. I was running 2 minutes late for class one day. I emailed my teacher saying, hey, I'm probably going to be 2 minutes late, maybe 5 minutes late to class. My teacher replied, if you're going to be late, don't show. So just because I'm late, the information, the education is not important anymore. And you see the difference. And obviously, you know, these are two different states, but you recognize that sometimes going into an environment where there's people that look like you, there are people that has your similar experiences, there are teachers who have children that look like you, makes a world of a difference in how you treat it and your connection to your education. You want it more because you see more people around you who want it. And they're not just valued because they can run a ball, shoot a ball, or hit a ball. They're valued because of their minds and what they have to bring. So I wanted to thank you, brothers, for this discussion. And I think, P, you hit it on the head that we probably need to continue this discussion moving forward. You know, Warren, I wanted to thank you, man. I know you have a game that you need to attend for your son. And I wanted to thank you for jumping on here, you know, giving us your perspective as a student athlete, your perspective as a coach, as well as your perspective as an administrator from a university. You know, everyone continue to be safe. You guys monitor your health, make sure your families are safe, and continue to social distance.
Yes, sir.
All right, till next time, y'all brothers be straight. We'll see you guys on the next broadcast.